Mateus Fernandes and Tchouameni might genuinely be on the way to Old Trafford. We would not have thought this is a scenario even 2 weeks ago because Mateus Fernandes was linked to PSG and Tchouameni was signing a contract. But how much changes in 2 weeks is crazy. Because yesterday, we saw Valverde and Tchouameni were in an insane fight at Real Madrid. Not one day, 2 days in a row. Why it went to the second day, God knows. But the thing is that Tchouameni and Valverde got into a fight. Of all the players Tchouameni could have picked a fight with, it was Valverde. And what makes this very interesting is that Valverde is going to be Real Madrid's next captain. So you know who Real Madrid is going to back out of Tchouameni and Valverde. Now, before you say, oh, it's a Tchouameni problem, oh, he has attitude problems, we don't want him. Well, the same thing is happening with a lot of Real Madrid players, even players that we ourselves deemed were good enough. Example, Alvaro Carreras. Well, we thought that he was all this disciplined, nice boy and all that, but then even he is throwing tantrums at Real Madrid. So it might just be an absolute toxic environment. You look at the players around there, look at the environment, it's chaos. With Mateus Fernandes, on the other hand, they're saying if West Ham is to get relegated, we might get him on a cut price deal. And a cut price deal means around 40 to 50 million pounds. If you get it for 50 million pounds, a midfielder of the level of Mateus Fernandes, guys, we're not getting another player of Mateus Fernandes' level unless you spend 80 or 90 million over. And this is why we are all, again, Spurs fans. As much as we want Spurs to go down for the banter and all that, we want Mateus Fernandes. That's way more important. So starting today, all of us are Tottenham fans. At the same time, Tchouameni is going to be a really likely outcome to come to United. When I say this would be the perfect midfield window, if you get me Tchouameni, you get me Mateus Fernandes, I might even forgive Ineos for going and signing Diomande. I might go and forgive Ineos if you want to sign Baleba. Because whether I think they're good or not, if you get me Tchouameni and you get me Mateus Fernandes, that is that pivot locked down. That means you have Mino and you have competition for Mino in Mateus Fernandes. Then you have Tchouameni, guys, Tchouameni. When I'm talking about Tchouameni, you're talking about one of the best central defensive midfielders in the world. We're talking about somebody who has pace, right? Moderate pace. We're talking about somebody who can drive with the ball. We're talking about somebody who has passing range. We're talking about somebody who has aerial threat. We're talking about somebody who has everything Casemiro has, but more mobility, smaller age, and he's in the France national team. So he might even come on the back of another World Cup. We're talking about a Tchouameni who's won the Champions League at Real Madrid. We're talking about a guy who's barely touching 26, 27 at tops. Even if he's 27, we're talking about a Tchouameni who'd probably be around in our team for another 5-6 years. And we're talking solidly, by the way. And partner him with Mateus Fernandes. Mateus Fernandes has been one of the best midfielders in the Premier League this season. And he's at relegated West Ham, by the way. Line-breaking passes, and you have a Tchouameni who's an absolute destroyer. At the same time, exactly like we saw with Casemiro, he has abilities which hasn't even been unlocked yet. Like that long-range passing that Casemiro had that we discovered at United, that's going to come out exactly the same at United. What it says in the title, what it says in the thumbnail, that's exactly what might just happen all out of nowhere. Because just a couple of weeks ago, we saw news that PSG were in for Mateus Fernandes. And then it was looking like, well, we're not competing with PSG for any players this season. There's no chance at all. And then Tchouameni and Real Madrid, oh, we're going to agree a contract. We're kind of using you. So whatever, this, that. But then, after you see news of Tchouameni and Valverde's fight, a fight in which, by the way, Valverde got into a big fight and he actually ended up in the hospital. So you know when your future club captain ends up in hospital, that one of the players has to go. There's no other way around it. And the fact that Tchouameni actually has suitors at at Man United, that is, you know that a bid is going to come from United. We're going to test the waters. We're going to see, what is this about Tchouameni? Tchouameni is available? Maybe we should just give a light 65 million bid. Let's see what happens. And they're going to end up asking for 75 million. Are you fussed about 75 million? Because what I'm going to ask you is, for the experience that Tchouameni has, right? He's replaced Casemiro. Maybe he hasn't performed to the level of Casemiro, but at the same time, I will say one thing about Tchouameni. Look at the players he's had around him and look at the players Casemiro had around him at Real Madrid. The stark difference in quality, and And we know that this Real Madrid whole dressing room has been toxic ever since they won the Champions League. They have too many egos. They have people who just want to play for themselves. And, that just creates a negative dressing room as it is. So now with all that included, how do you expect any player to really thrive? And despite all this, we potentially could have one of the best center defensive midfielders in the world for 70 to 80 million pounds. So, Tonali is a good option, don't get me wrong. But if you're telling me Tchouameni is available for 70 or 80 million, I'm not paying anything for Tonali over 50 million. Because there's a Tchouameni here. Guys, we better not forget the fact that Tchouameni can control games, not just in the Premier League, he can do it in the Champions League as well. He's a dual player, and we know why he will translate. You know why he will translate? Because the guy is tall, because the guy is physical. Yeah, his game is around physicality, it's around tackles, it's around IQ. Everything you need to succeed in the Premier League. Like, Tchouameni is one player who cannot fail at this club. He cannot. It's not possible. And just like him, as a box-to-box midfielder, Matheus Fernandes just cannot fail because he has everything. You know the PSG midfield where they have 3/8? Tell me Matheus Fernandes would not slot in perfectly. First of all, he's Portuguese. Secondly, he has the same dynamism that your João Neves has, that your Vitinha has. Now, maybe he's not as good as them, but you can see the dynamic ability of you can play a 6, you can play a 10, you can play an 8, you can do almost everything. You have line-breaking passes, you have IQ, you have dribbling ability, you have everything you need to succeed as a box-to-box midfielder. Now, we got to just paint the picture, right? You have Mino and you have Matheus Fernandes as box-to-box. And then you have a Tchouameni, and you never know, maybe it's a Baleba, maybe it's a Wharton. But you have another Baleba, Wharton, one of those guys, along with Tchouameni. Now you're looking at a backup midfield, by the way, of Matheus Fernandes and Baleba. This is to complement a Mino and Tchouameni who would probably be playing in our bigger games, or the ones we want to really control and dominate. And then you have Matheus Fernandes and Baleba coming off the bench. This is to supplement whatever other players that we get in other positions. Because now apparently we're looking at Lewis Hall. Well, surprise, surprise, we get Champions League and suddenly we're linked to Lewis Hall again. If we do get Lewis Hall, you're going to spend about 70 million plus. But I don't know who is fussed about that, given the fact that he is probably the best left back in the Premier League. So why not dish that money? Why not just go and win the Premier League next season just by dishing that money there? Your wingers, right? Wingers in Morgan Rogers is one of real big interest. Now, do you want a Morgan Rogers, given that he's one of those wing fielder profiles? Now, do we need a wing fielder profile? I don't mind any, to be fair, because I feel if you want control in this team, if you want to win in this Premier League, you need control, because that's one thing most of these clubs don't have. Now, if you want more control, it's pretty logical that you want a player who wants to control games. And players who control games, like it or not, are wing fielders, not the ones who run around or who are like pacey guys. Like they talk about Yan Diomande. See, Diomande, he's not the worst player, right? I agree. He's not the worst player. But if you're going to compare him to an NDI, or you compare him to even a Morgan Rogers, he doesn't have the IQ or close decision making that comes with playing at the high level. And what do I mean? Because Bundesliga is decent. Even Champions League group stage is decent. But we're talking about the next level. We're talking about taking it against the biggest teams. Now people are going to say, oh, but NDI didn't have a good game against City. So where were you all when he had a good performance against Chelsea? Where were you all when he had a good performance against Liverpool? When he had a good performance against United, but then Everton didn't score, so we don't count NDI's performances anymore. Not the fact that he really put Luke Shaw on skates. The fact that he made Carrick swap fullbacks just because NDI was too much on that side. Like, let's not forget that part, by the way. And that is a player that people are telling me, India is overrated. Oh, because he can't finish, apparently. As if we don't have finishers in this club. We have Cunha who scores goals now. And according to other people who keep telling me that Mbomo is one of those players. And then we have Benjamin Sesko, obviously, who can score goals. Now we have 3 finishers. You don't win games. You don't, in fact, win titles with 3 goal scorers starting in your front 3. You need a facilitator, you need a creator, you need one man who's just chaos, you need one man who's a goal scorer. That's essentially how you do it. You look at PSG's front three, you look at Bayern's front three, you look at Barca's front three. They have that balance. You look at Barca's front three, for example, Lewandowski, goal scorer, Rafinha, chaos, Yamal, creator. Now you look at Bayern. Bayern's again a different case because Kane is almost everything. He's one of the best strikers to ever exist. So he is a finisher and a creator. Olise is a creator. Diaz is just chaos. Now you look at Kvaratskhelia and let's look at PSG. Kvaratskhelia, creator. Dembele, finisher. Doué, pure skills and chaos. Like this is the balance all top teams have. So now we want to replicate the same thing. So now you're looking at potentially Sesko as being the finisher, even though you can debate that. Let's say Sesko is the finisher. Let's say Cunha is the chaos man. If these are the two of the front three, who do you want beside him? You want somebody who controls the ball, a creator, somebody with IQ. So now if you are to play Diomande, make it make sense. If you want to play Mbomo, it does not make sense because you already have a Sesko there. You have a finisher. Now, if you want an Ahmad on form would be ideally who you want to go for. But the thing with Ahmad is, do we want to sell him? Do we want to keep him? That's a whole debate for another day. But we need somebody who creates. And that is why the perfect player for the right wing position for Man United is Ndiaye. And the whole reason being that he is going to control games for us. And yeah, that is the winger section anyways. But then the midfield, guys, it's looking nice. It's looking nice because if you get a Matheus Fernandes, you get a Tchouameni, we're controlling games in the Premier League, we're controlling games in the Champions League, and Man United, we are coming for the next year's Premier League title. What do you guys think anyway? Who else would you sign? If it's not for Matheus Fernandes and if it's not for Tchouameni, who would you sign? Comment that all down below, and I will see you all in the next one.